Hey everyone! Welcome to Anime Dreams. Today's fanfiction discussion delves into an exciting what-if scenario. What if Naruko was the fox-blooded god? Part 3. Disclaimer: this channel is dedicated to entertainment and discussion. I do not own any of the anime footage featured in my videos. All rights and credits go to their respective creators and copyright holders. Without further ado, let's dive in. Naruko was undeniably exhausted. She had been traveling on foot from Washington, D.C., and the journey had begun to wear on her. This quest was already proving to be a challenge, but more than anything, she was tired of trekking through endless wilderness. The persistent bugs buzzing around her were not helping either. Her lion-themed trench coat provided some protection, but her face and any other exposed skin were fair game for the relentless insects. In hindsight, she should have picked up some bug spray in Boston, but she had wanted to avoid the hassle of navigating a crowded city. Now, she was regretting that decision. Just then, her phone rang, offering a much-needed distraction. As she answered, a familiar voice wasted no time in speaking. "I see at least one of us has decided to use the Shroud program I developed. How's it working for you?" Naruko was momentarily puzzled before smirking. "What? No hello, Steve? Can't say I'm surprised, we do tend to think alike," she chuckled. "Anyway, I figured it would come in handy for a quest like this. The program works, but it's a little slow at identifying certain creatures." "Oh? What kind of creatures are we talking about?" Steve inquired. "The Nemean lion, for one," Naruko grumbled. "The system didn't even register the monster until it was practically on top of me." That's an odd glitch, but I appreciate the feedback, little sister," Steve replied. "Keep in mind, you're working with an early version of the iPhone 5 and some prototype software. I'll make sure to push an update for both the phone and the program soon." "Thanks, Steve. I hope it won't be too much trouble for your team." "Oh, they don't even know about it," Steve admitted. "My partner and I are handling this ourselves. We want to make sure our detection system is as effective as possible for everyone." "That's good too," Naruko started but was cut off by a sharp beeping sound. It was coming from her detection system. "Oh great, it just went off," she muttered. "What is it this time?" Steve asked, sounding concerned. Naruko glanced around, quickly assessing her surroundings. She was in a clearing, surrounded by trees. Perched on the branches were several dark, pigeon-like birds, except these weren't ordinary birds. No, she recognized them immediately. "These aren't ravens," she murmured. "They're Stymphalian birds." "Oh dear. Well, good luck with that. Call me if you make it through," Steve replied a little too casually. "Gee, thanks," Naruko muttered, lowering her phone as the screen dimmed. She slipped it into her pocket, her gaze locked onto the birds. Something about them seemed different from the last time she had encountered them. Their feathers were a deeper shade of black, and their beaks gleamed with a metallic sheen. But it wasn't the celestial bronze she was used to seeing, it was something darker, more ominous. "Stygian iron?" she whispered. Naruko exhaled and reached for the weapons gifted to her by her grandfather, Ares. She narrowed her eyes at the birds, her mind racing with questions. What happened to these things? What could have changed them so much? She took a deep breath and prepared herself. This wasn't her first time facing these creatures. She just needed to channel her energy, focus the force within her toward them. "No." Naruko's eyes snapped open in shock. That single word echoed in her mind. She wasn't in the clearing anymore. The world around her had vanished, replaced by an endless void of darkness. "No?" she repeated, startled by the unfamiliar voice within her thoughts. "That's right. No. I don't feel like fighting this battle for you," the voice stated firmly. From the shadows, a figure emerged, another version of herself. But something was off. Her eyes. One was blue, the other red. Her clothing was a strange mix of both her past and present selves, creating an unsettling contrast. I don't understand, Naruko admitted. Why wouldn't you want to fight? You've always forced your way in before. Now you're refusing? That doesn't make any sense. The other version of herself let out a sharp laugh. Ha! I am your chaos. I don't have to make sense. Naruko felt a bead of sweat form on her forehead. How strange was it that this person's logic, despite its oddity, actually made sense? So, what now? Oh, that's simple. We take care of those birds using something I've mastered over the years. The focus. And that is? Oh, it's a rare ability, something only a few of Athena's children inherit. Ever wonder why she excels at everything she does? The focus is the key. The other person paused thoughtfully for a moment. Oh, and I think it would be wise for you to get moving, the birds are coming for you. And how do I get back? Oh, easy. Close your eyes and then open them. Duh. The other person grinned before vanishing with a song. Come with me, and you'll be, in a world of pure imagination. Naruko twitched at that. It reminded her way too much of the Willy Wonka movie. Following the instructions, she closed her eyes and reopened them, finding herself back in the clearing. The difference now was that the birds were circling her, ready to strike. But something else caught her attention. Her focus had activated. Everything around her seemed to slow down, as if time itself was stretching, giving her mind space to think. Strategies began forming instantly, ways to handle the birds, recalling how Hercules himself once dealt with them. Without hesitation, she pointed at some of the creatures and unleashed a barrage of projectiles. She wasn't even aware that she had an audience, some eyes fixed on her didn't belong to the enemy. Each projectile found its mark, colliding with the monstrous birds and causing them to vanish in a swirl of black smoke. That was unusual. The smoke lingered, forming an obscuring haze, making it harder to aim. The power of the focus was immense, but Naruko was still new to it. She could feel the strain creeping in, the pounding in her head growing stronger, her arms growing tired from wielding weapons she wasn't entirely accustomed to. Sensing her weakness, the birds struck. They slammed into her wrists, knocking her weapons out of reach. A second later, they collided with her back, forcing her onto her knees. Her hood slipped forward, partially covering her face. This isn't how it was supposed to go. Frustration flared in her mind as the birds continued their assault. Her trench coat shielded her from the worst of the impact, but she could still feel each hit. You're right. This isn't how this was supposed to go. Try again. Show them who's in charge. But my weapons are out of reach. Even if they return to my pocket dimension, I won't have time to grab them. Oh, please. Stop relying solely on your weapons. Think outside the box. You've spent all this time researching new techniques, put them to use. Then, silence. But the focus remained. The headache returned, but this time, it wasn't as overwhelming. That was when a realization struck. She had studied and trained endlessly. A memory surfaced, one of her past self learning the gentle fist style so she could pass it down to her child. She had adapted the technique for this world, blending it with something else, wind manipulation. She had found a way to combine them. This was far from over. Enough! Naruko shouted. Clapping her hands together, she channeled wind chakra into her palms, unleashing a powerful burst of air that sent the birds scattering. I'm not finished yet. As she rose, her gaze locked onto her opponents through the eye holes of her lion-themed hood. She was done holding back. Losing the first round had only fueled her determination. All right then. Round 2. The wind swirled around her hands, intensifying. Grandfather Zeus, if you're listening, I could use a little help. A sudden clap of thunder echoed through the sky. The birds shrieked in response, their calls piercing through the now stormy atmosphere. The wind howled, whipping around Naruko as she stood her ground. With a final caw, the birds dove toward her. This time, she was prepared. The focus sharpened everything, each bird seemed to move in slow motion. One by one, they fell as her wind-infused palm struck them. The raging currents surrounding her hands shredded them upon contact. This was no longer the gentle fist. That style required an opponent with chakra, manipulating their energy without them realizing it. This, what she had created, was something new. She called it Fist of the Tempest. The technique harnessed wind chakra, shaping it into razor-sharp currents that swirled violently, tearing through anything in its path. And with it, she was ready to finish the fight. As Naruko continued to battle, she noticed the thick black smoke that the birds were transforming into, once again obscuring her vision. However, this time, she remained unfazed. She had discovered that the focus allowed her to perceive shapes within the smoke, enabling her to keep up with the fight as swiftly as before. Finally, the relentless attack ceased. Remaining cautious, she summoned the wind to clear away the lingering black haze, ensuring it wasn't another trick. As the air cleared, only a handful of birds remained, hovering in midair with glowing red eyes fixed on her. They let out a unified, piercing call before something unexpected happened. The birds began merging, vanishing into the swirling black smoke, which rapidly expanded as it absorbed the remnants of darkness still lingering in the air. When the storm of shadows settled, it revealed a towering version of the very bird she had been battling, a colossal creature radiating fury. But Naruko was just as determined. Unconsciously, she summoned even more wind, the energy crackling around her hands like miniature tempests. With Zeus watching over her, the storm in her grasp grew even more intense. "I've had enough of this," she declared firmly. "I know you're being controlled somehow, this shouldn't even be possible. But figuring that out won't stop you. I can see you're angry, but so am I." As the massive bird of darkness dove toward her, its sharp beak poised for an attack, Naruko leapt toward it, extending her right hand. Winds howled around her, gathering into a powerful force. "Then take this, the wrath of the lion," she called out, unknowingly making a play on her appearance. The bird's crimson eyes widened in alarm as it witnessed the winds form into the head of a giant lion. A fearful caw escaped its beak as the roaring storm-clad lion charged forward, crashing into it with immense force. A final shriek of defeat rang out as the beast was torn apart, vanishing not into black smoke this time, but into the familiar yellow mist and sulfuric scent that signaled the end of a monster. Landing back on the ground, Naruko panted heavily, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle over her. "Something strange is happening. But the real question is, what?" she murmured. Suddenly, a sharp pain pulsed through her head, making her wince. The focus had finally slipped away, leaving her drained. She had already been physically exhausted from her long journey from New York to the outskirts of Salem, and after battling endlessly, the mental strain had now caught up with her. She was completely worn out. As her body gave in and she began to collapse, she felt someone catch her before she hit the ground. Though she was already slipping into unconsciousness, she managed to tilt her head slightly, catching a glimpse of a girl with raven-colored hair and a silver circlet on her forehead. "You have done well, Naruko," the girl's voice reassured her. Naruko smiled slightly before allowing sleep to take her. July 13, 2012. Slowly, Naruko's eyes fluttered open, but the brightness forced her to shut them again. This time, she opened them more carefully, adjusting to the light. Above her, she could make out the fabric of a tent, confirming that someone had found her. But who? Had they seen her battle, or had some kind stranger taken pity on a wandering girl? Stranger things had certainly happened before. "Ah, I see you're awake," a voice spoke, a voice that felt oddly familiar, like a distant memory from her past. Turning her head, Naruko's eyes widened in surprise as she took in the sight of a young girl, likely around 12 years old, 2 years younger than herself. The girl had striking auburn hair and was dressed in leather hunting gear. Naruko immediately recognized her. Oh, she definitely knew this person. So much so that, despite her exhaustion, she forced herself into a kneeling position out of respect. "My apologies, Lady Artemis. I did not realize I had entered your hunting grounds, but my rather unusual quest has led me to Salem," she said sincerely. The red-haired girl frowned slightly before responding, "Why do you feel the need to be so formal with me, Naruko? Given our history, I expected you to be more at ease around me and the hunters. Despite herself, Naruko couldn't help but smile slightly while keeping her head bowed. For that reason alone, Lady Artemis. I was just a 7-year-old when I first earned your favor. Now that I am older, I have no desire to show any disrespect. At this, Artemis rolled her eyes and gave a small shrug, her expression amused yet firm. Oh, honestly. Just because I have taken a vow, transformed a few arrogant individuals into animals, and dealt with those who commit terrible acts, everyone assumes I dislike all men. Look at me, Naruko. The blonde hesitated before lifting her gaze, though Artemis noted that her face looked a bit pale. I do not dislike all men, only those who act with cruelty or selfishness. My vow requires me to keep my distance, but that does not mean I am incapable of friendship. I still consider you a friend, so let's not be so formal about this. Naruko let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and smiled as she settled back down. You have no idea how relieved I am to hear that. As I grew older, I started to worry that I might lose a friend. Artemis offered a gentle smile. That's understandable, given all the myths told about me by foolish men. But relax, I doubt Zoe wants to listen to this conversation either. Thou art correct. I do not, Zoe stated as she entered the tent, casting Naruko an unimpressed glance. Naruko grinned, a playful twinkle in her eyes. It's nice to see you again, big sis. Ever since Artemis and her hunters had rescued her, Naruko had come to see Zoe much like she did Clarice and Talia, like an older sister. However, Zoe also held a special place in her heart. As a 7-year-old on the verge of being attacked by a monstrous hound, Naruko had been saved at the last moment by Zoe, a fierce and skilled warrior. Who wouldn't look up to someone like that? At first, Zoe had kept her distance, wary of Naruko due to past experiences. But Naruko's genuine, childlike kindness had slowly broken through her defenses. Zoe's usual stern expression softened into a small smile. It is good to see thee again, but one must ask, why art thou here? And with that pelt? Naruko stiffened, realizing she had completely forgotten what her coat represented to Zoe. Hercules had worn something similar, and the memory of his betrayal still lingered in Zoe's mind. Oh. I didn't think about that. I can take it off if it bothers you. Zoe shook her head, stopping Naruko before she could remove it. Even now, she was the same thoughtful girl who always wanted to bring others happiness. No, keep it. Perhaps in time, you will replace the image it carries with a better memory. Naruko nodded, relieved, though she still felt sore from her previous battle. Oh, and take this. It seems you've earned a rather unique prize, Zoe said, handing her a pair of black fingerless gloves. Naruko slipped them on, flexing her fingers as Zoe observed, They resemble Talia's preferred style. I hope thou dost not adopt her attitude as well, little sister. Naruko chuckled sheepishly. She said plenty of chances, but she still hasn't managed to change me. Zoe allowed a small smile at that. She wasn't particularly fond of Talia's decision to refuse the hunt, but she respected Naruko's bond with her. Her gaze shifted as Naruko clenched her fists, causing the gloves to transform into sharp gauntlets. Interesting. Stygian iron gauntlets. I wonder how those birds managed to create such a thing, Zoe mused. So you recognize them? Artemis noted. At Naruko's curious glance, she elaborated, it seems that in certain areas, monsters have begun evolving into stronger, more dangerous forms. We do not yet know the cause, but regardless, we shall continue our duty to hunt them. So this isn't an isolated incident, Naruko murmured, concern creeping into her voice. Indeed. But now, I must ask, what exactly are you doing here? Artemis questioned, raising an eyebrow. Ah, that's simple, Naruko replied. The oracle told me to travel to the nation's capital alone to uncover something important. So, I did as she instructed. When I arrived, I wasn't sure what to look for, so I decided to explore. But when my tour group reached the Lincoln Memorial, well, that's when things got chaotic. The Nemean lion attacked, and I had to fight it. As you can see, I won, but during the battle, I discovered something. And what was that? Zoe inquired. A new path forward. I learned that I needed to come to Salem because that was the last known location of someone who had embarked on a similar journey. Additionally, Hecate personally requested that I come here to address a problem she's facing. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I intend to find out. Artemis sighed, her expression turning solemn. The reason they stopped here is because they vanished without a trace. Zoe looked startled. My lady, I was not aware of this. Salem has long been a place of mystery, especially since the witch trials, Artemis explained. The children of Hecate cursed this land with their final breaths. I do not recall all the details, but the last individual to take on this task simply disappeared, and the quest was abandoned, until now. That makes sense, Naruko acknowledged. I just don't know what Hecate expects me to do. Maybe I'm meant to help lay their spirits to rest. Artemis rose from her seat and motioned for them to follow. Outside, they rejoined the rest of the hunt, who observed Naruko with a mixture of familiarity and caution. Once everyone had gathered, Artemis spoke again. I do not believe your presence here is a coincidence. It is possible that the appearance of these unusual monsters and the mysteries of Salem are connected. I see, Naruko responded thoughtfully. But before she could continue, a strange sound caught her attention. She turned, her eyes widening in alarm at the sight of something looming behind Artemis and Zoe. The other hunters noticed it too and immediately readied themselves for battle. The creature was shadowy, its form shifting like mist. Its face was grotesque, its features distorted beyond recognition, and it was draped in a tattered cloak. Without thinking, Naruko instinctively reached out to warn them, but to her shock, something surged from her hands. The energy struck the creature, causing it to let out a piercing screech before fleeing into the darkness. What was that? One of the huntresses asked, her voice tinged with horror. The others quickly turned to check on Artemis, making sure their goddess was unharmed. Naruko, however, remained still, staring at her hands in disbelief. Something had just awakened within her. And she wasn't sure what it meant. That was a wraith, Artemis said, shivering slightly at the eerie sound it had made. That also sheds some light on what's happening in Salem. Are you saying that was a child of Hecate? Naruko asked, glancing at her gauntlets and mentally noting the potential use of projectiles for later. Possibly, or it could be just another lost soul trapped in the mortal realm, Artemis replied with a hint of sadness. Well, it looks like I know what I need to do, Naruko said with a sigh. I should handle this quickly. You will not face this alone, Zoe stated firmly. I have a feeling there is more to this situation than meets the eye. I'm glad you think so, Zoe, Artemis said, placing a reassuring hand on the huntress's shoulder. In fact, I believe we will all be willing to help. After all, we were the ones attacked first. Naruko looked at them in surprise, but Artemis simply smiled at her. It seemed she had gained more than a few allies along the way. Thank you, she said sincerely. 30. As the group entered the city of Salem, they quickly realized something was wrong. The sky was unnaturally dark, not from clouds, but from the presence of countless wraiths drifting ominously above. The most unsettling part, however, was the people. At first glance, they appeared to be going about their daily routines, but a closer look revealed the truth. Each person had a wraith hovering near them, draining their energy and leaving them in a state of fear or despair. Yet, not a single mortal seemed to notice the creatures. This is definitely not a good sign, Naruko observed, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. No, but it does mean we have quite the challenge ahead, Artemis said with a smirk. Nice wordplay, Naruko noted with a small smile. Pardon? Artemis asked, tilting her head in curiosity. My beloved YouTube community. That's a wrap for now. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more amazing content. Much love and appreciation. Anime Dreams.